I'm Luna Garcia, and let me tell you a story, my story, the kind you don't hear around dinner tables or in family newsletters. I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I was born with a paper napkin and told to wipe the table after everyone else was done eating. For most of my life, I was the background character in my own family, present, quiet, dismissed. They thought I was soft. They mistook silence for weakness, modesty for failure. The Garcia name meant legacy, real estate, old money, but only if you played their game, followed their rules, and stayed inside their lines. I didn't. 10 years ago, I walked away with nothing but my grandmother's old journals, a secondhand laptop, and a memory of her whispering, "Real power doesn't shout, Luna. It waits." I remembered that. So I waited. What they never realized was that while they toasted to each other's egos, I was building. While they laughed behind my back, I bought the land beneath their feet. While they plotted my exclusion, I rewrote the rules. And now I'm back, not for recognition, not for applause. I'm here for the truth, for what was stolen, for what was buried, for what was mine. This isn't just revenge, it's reclamation, and it starts today. They never said it out loud, but I was the ghost in the family portrait, the kind you crop out, not with scissors, but with silence. Growing up in Savannah, Georgia, in a house that looked like it belonged on a postcard but felt like a museum of cold stares, I learned early that affection was transactional. You had to earn it, and if you didn't play your part, smile, behave, make the family look good, you were forgotten, even when standing right there at the dinner table. My name is Luna Garcia, and I was born into the kind of Southern legacy people envy from afar. Old money, real estate empires, champagne toasts on Christmas Eve. But behind every toast was a gritted smile. Behind every inheritance was a legend. And behind every perfect photo was me, standing just outside the frame. My mother, Lorraine Garcia, always said I had her eyes, but they only saw through me. My father, Douglas, a man who measured worth in assets and obedience, treated me like a miscalculation. I wasn't their prized investment like my half-brother Harrison. The golden child, the future, the Garcia name reborn. At 18, after years of sitting through family functions as a polite afterthought, I left. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors, just a note taped to the fridge and a bus ticket out of town. Enrolled in a public college upstate, worked nights waiting tables, and buried my last name so deep no one could use it against me. And then I disappeared. For over a decade, I lived as Luna Lane. I paid my way through school, started investing quietly in undervalued properties, rundown duplexes, forgotten motels, land no one believed in but me. I watched, learned, and waited. Every deal I made, I heard my father's voice in the back of my mind, scoffing, "You don't have the stomach for this, kid." Every time I proved him wrong, I smiled to myself. But it wasn't until last, when the envelope arrived at my Brooklyn apartment, that the ghost came clawing back. No return address, just my name, not Lane, Garcia. Inside was a letter, brittle with age, written in the familiar looping cursive of someone I hadn't seen in 15 years. My grandmother, Elizabeth Garcia. She'd passed when I was 19, or so they'd told me. But this letter had a date, 6 months ago. It began with one sentence, "Luna, if you're reading this, then someone lied to you." My hands trembled. I read it over and over as if the ink would vanish if I blinked. She spoke of secrets kept from me, of a legacy buried beneath greed, of a truth I deserved to know. And then, one final line, "Come home, take back what was always yours." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I booked a one-way ticket to Savannah. I didn't call, didn't warn them. If they wanted to forget me, I'd give them the shock of remembering. As the train rolled past fields of pine and red clay, I stared out the window and let the silence settle in. I wasn't coming back to be acknowledged. I was coming back to reclaim. Savannah hadn't changed. The same cobblestone streets, the Spanish moss hanging like secrets from the trees. But I had, and this time, I wasn't here to knock. I was here to walk straight through the front door. I arrived at the Garcia estate just past noon. The gate still bore the family crest, Wrought iron, two lions flanking a capital C. It used to intimidate me. Now it looked like a tombstone. I pressed the buzzer. Hello? A familiar voice crackled through. I recognized it instantly. Margaret, the longtime housekeeper who'd once slipped me warm biscuits when no one was watching. It's Luna, I said. My voice didn't shake. There was a pause, just long enough to taste disbelief before the gate groaned open. The house loomed ahead, all brick and arrogance. I stepped out of the cab with nothing but a small leather satchel. No entourage, no announcement. Just me in heels that didn't click the same way on Garcia marble floors anymore. Margaret met me at the door, her eyes wide with something between shock and relief. Miss Luna, she whispered, as if saying my name might summon lightning. Just Luna, I replied with a soft smile. You look exactly the same. You don't, she said, voice trembling. You look like you came back for war. I didn't answer. Inside, the air was chilled, staged perfection. The same oil paintings, the same leather chairs no one ever sat in. And standing at the far end of the foyer, framed by a crystal chandelier, was him. Douglas Garcia. My father, older, grayer, but still sharp as a blade. His navy suit pressed, his watch gleaming. He looked at me the way one might regard a ghost, not with grief, but with inconvenience. Well, he said, look what the wind dragged in. I didn't flinch. Surprised? I figured you were dead or wanted to be. He crossed his arms, jaw tight. Why are you here? I took a breath. I received a letter. From Grandma Elizabeth. His face didn't change, but his eyes flickered, just for a second. That's impossible, he said flatly. Mother's been dead for over a decade. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter, placed it on the table between us. He didn't touch it, just stared. You want to explain that? I asked. Forgery, he said too quickly, or someone playing games. Either way, it's not your concern anymore. I leaned in, voice calm. It is now. He turned away. You're not entitled to anything, Luna. You left. No, I said I was erased. Silence stretched. Then, whatever you think you're here for, let it go. The estate is already accounted for. Harrison is the legal heir. Ah, Harrison, my half-brother, Daddy's protege. The one who never had to earn a damn thing. I'm not here for leftovers, I said. I'm here for the truth. And with that, I turned my back to him, walked upstairs like I still belonged. Margaret followed me quietly, tears welling in her eyes. Your room's been turned into an office, she said softly. Figures, I replied. Where's Grandma Elizabeth's room? She hesitated. Sealed off. After she passed, no one went in. Your father wouldn't allow it. I need to see it. That night, long after everyone had gone to sleep, I stood in front of the old wooden door, its brass handle cold in my hand. My heart thundered in my chest, not from fear, but from something more dangerous. Knowing I was getting closer, I pushed the door open. Dust floated in the moonlight. The scent of lavender and old paper lingered. Her room was preserved like a shrine. Nothing touched, nothing taken, except a drawer was slightly ajar. I stepped closer. Inside was a faded leather-bound journal. I opened it, hands trembling. And there, pressed between the pages, was a photograph of me as a child with her. But scrawled across the back in her handwriting were 4 chilling words. Not Douglas, not his. They didn't expect me to show up, and certainly not in black. The Garcia dining room had always been the theater of my worst humiliations. Crystal glasses, white tablecloths, silver forks lined like soldiers. But beneath all that sparkle was something colder than marble. Judgment. I stood at the threshold, every eye already on me. Luna? Gasped Aunt June, blinking as if I'd stepped out of a grave. Harrison dropped his spoon. What are you doing here? Isn't this a family conference? I replied, my voice level. I'm still technically family, last I checked. Douglas sat at the head of the table, fingers steepled, mouth pressed into a thin, annoyed line. Barely, I walked in anyway, each step echoing off the parquet floor. Margaret had already set a place for me, God bless her. I won't be long, I said, taking the empty seat opposite Harrison. Just here to listen. You were never good at staying quiet, Harrison muttered. And yet I'm still better at reading a will. He scowled. Aunt June hissed under her breath. The room crackled with old electricity. Douglas cleared his throat. Let's move forward. A man in a gray suit entered, a lawyer, young, eager, out of his depth. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. My name is Benjamin Wolfe. From Wallace and Green, he began. I was retained by Mr. Douglas Garcia to facilitate the legal transition of assets and property within the Garcia family estate. This includes the Savannah property, offshore accounts, and the land deeds in Vermont. Benjamin glanced around the table, pausing when his eyes met mine. His voice faltered for half a second. Mr. Garcia has expressed his intention to name Harrison Garcia as the sole legal heir, per the terms outlined here. He slid the document down the table. Harrison puffed up like a balloon, already smug. And what about Elizabeth Garcia's legacy? I asked softly. Benjamin blinked. Excuse me? My grandmother's holdings, I continued. She had her own estate, her own trusts. This house was hers, not Douglas. Where is her will? Benjamin looked flustered. I was told that Elizabeth Garcia's assets were consolidated into the family trust when she passed. Who told you that? Douglas's voice cut through the air like a blade. That's enough. I leaned forward. Was it you, Dad? He didn't blink. You were gone. You didn't ask, so no. You don't get a say. Funny. I seem to recall Elizabeth leaving me something, I said, reaching into my coat pocket. I pulled out the letter, the same one I'd shown him before, but this time I laid it flat on the table for everyone to see. Aunt June gasped. Harrison leaned in, squinting. She wrote this a month before her death, I said. She knew something, and she left this for me to find. Benjamin scanned the letter, his brow furrowed. This changes things. No, it doesn't, Douglas snapped. It's not notarized. It's not an official document. It's evidence, I replied, that she had intentions beyond what you disclosed. Harrison stood up, voice rising. You think you can waltz in here with a note and undo everything? You're nothing, Luna. You're not even a real Garcia. I didn't flinch. Maybe I'm not, but we're going to find out. Benjamin cleared his throat nervously. Given this new information, I'd advise pausing any asset transfer until further review of Miss Elizabeth Garcia's legal documents. Douglas stood, the table rattling beneath his hand. This is absurd. She's trying to derail everything out of spite. I'm trying to find the truth, I said. If that derails you, maybe it says more about your foundation than mine. The room fell silent. Then Margaret entered, holding a small package wrapped in aged velvet. This arrived this morning, she said. It was addressed to Luna. I took it gently. The handwriting on the tag was unmistakable. Elizabeth's. Inside, beneath layers of tissue, was a silver locket and a flash drive. The room held its breath as I turned the locket over in my hand. It was cold, heavier than I expected. A faint engraving on the back, MC always, my initials. I pressed the clasp. Inside was a tiny photo of me as a child. Missing front teeth, eyes full of trust, and a folded slip of paper yellowed with age. You're stronger than they'll ever allow you to believe. If you're reading this, you already know they've hidden more than money from you. Don't stop now, Elizabeth. I glanced at the flash drive beside it. It looked ordinary, but nothing from my grandmother ever was. Is it more letters? Harrison mocked. Or maybe your high school poetry. I pocketed both items without answering. I'll find out soon enough. Benjamin Wolfe adjusted his tie, trying to maintain some semblance of control. I believe this development warrants a temporary hold on any finalization of legal documentation. I'll request access to the Garcia estate archives, including any codicils to Elizabeth Garcia's will. Douglas barked out a humorless laugh. We've already sorted through her files. There's nothing else. Margaret, still standing quietly in the corner, cleared her throat. Not everything was kept in the house. The table turned to her. She hesitated, then looked at me. Your grandmother used to keep important things at the Savannah Bank's safety deposit vault? Box 72. She went every month without fail. Benjamin scribbled something in his notepad. We'll need a court order if it wasn't listed in the formal records. I'll get one, I said, standing. You'll do no such thing, Douglas snapped. You're not a legal heir. Yet. The tension was thick. Aunt June mumbled something to Harrison. His knuckles turned white on the table edge. I met Douglas's stare head on. You can throw every threat in your arsenal, but here's what you're forgetting. I grew up watching you lie through your teeth. I know the signs. He didn't blink. You never belonged here. That word again. Belonging. Funny how they clung to bloodlines and old names like armor while they hollowed out every part of what made a family real. I know, I said simply, and that's exactly why I came back. I walked out of the dining room, the flash drive clutched in my palm. My heart was thudding, not just with anger, but with clarity. For years, I believed I had nothing, no claim, no voice. But if Elizabeth left behind breadcrumbs, I would follow them. I stopped at the first floor study, the one they used to call the map room. It was where Elizabeth taught me chess on rainy afternoons. The board was still there, dusty, neglected. I set the flash drive into my laptop, waiting as the screen blinked to life. A single folder titled Property Transfers Not Finalized. Inside were scanned documents, some with Elizabeth's signature, some redacted. My eyes scanned line after line until I saw it. Property grant, Vermont estate, contingent transfer to MC pending review of final will. My breath caught. That estate. The one Douglas and Harrison were planning to sell to an international buyer. The one they claimed was already theirs. It was never theirs, at least not yet. A second file blinked open, an audio recording. I plugged in my earbuds and hit play. At first, just static. Then, Elizabeth's voice. If anything happens to me before the official paperwork is filed, I want this to be known. I never intended for Douglas or Harrison to take control of the Vermont estate. Luna was always my choice. She understands legacy. They only understand control. The file cut out. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. This was it. This was proof. But then, a soft knock on the study door. I quickly pulled the flash drive and turned off the screen. Yes! The door creaked open. Margaret stepped in, eyes cautious. There's something else, she whispered. Something your grandmother told me to give you, but only when you were ready. She handed me a thin envelope. No return address. Just one word, written in Elizabeth's hand. Truth. If you want to find the truth in my family, don't look in the photo albums. Look in the ledger books. The ones no one talks about. The ones that never made it to probate court. The envelope Margaret gave me sat on my lap like it might combust if I moved too quickly. The word truth, penned in my grandmother's sharp, deliberate script, seemed to throb with heat beneath my fingers. For a moment, I just stared at it. I wasn't sure if I was ready. But then again, I hadn't been ready for any of this, and yet, here I was. I tore the seal. Inside was a single key taped to a folded sheet of stationery. On the paper, another note, short and precise. Box 72, Savannah Bank. Ledger dated January 12, 2008. Ask Maurice, she knows who you are. Adley? I blinked. 2008. I was 15 that year. The same year Elizabeth started acting more distant, at least according to my memory. That was also the year Douglas and Harrison began traveling frequently for business. I used to think they were expanding the Garcia real estate holdings. Now, I wasn't so sure. I left the estate the next morning at dawn, long before the rest of the family stirred. My phone buzzed once. An unknown number, but I let it ring into silence. Whatever they wanted could wait. Savannah Bank was nestled on the edge of historic downtown, a white brick building framed by live oaks and iron fencing. It looked more like a courthouse than a place where fortunes were buried. At the front desk, a woman in her 60s with a honey blonde bob looked up from her computer. Her name tag read Louise. I approached, clutching the key in my palm. I believe my grandmother left something here. Elizabeth Garcia, box 72. Her eyes flicked to my face, then down to the key. A beat passed. Then she nodded. Without a word, she stood and walked me through a security door, past a corridor lined with dark wood paneling until we reached a quiet vault room. Inside, the silence felt padded, as if it were designed to muffle not just noise, but secrets. She gestured to a low metal box in the corner. "It's yours now," she said quietly. "She told me you'd come." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, thick and weathered with a golden clasp. Beneath it was a thin envelope marked "For Luna Only." I set the letter aside for now, my eyes drawn to the ledger. Flipping it open, I found entries in Elizabeth's handwriting: business accounts, asset transfers, and side investments. Some were expected: farmland parcels, antiques, bonds. But then, halfway through, I saw a name: that Harrison Garcia. Unauthorized withdrawals, 200820012. Page after page, Elizabeth had documented funds being siphoned off from dormant accounts originally set aside in my name. It wasn't just money, it was theft. A betrayal neatly cataloged in dollar signs and transaction codes. I flipped faster, then I saw another name: Douglas Garcia, offshore holdings, reallocated ownership rights. The word reallocated was underlined twice. Next to it, coercion suspected, will update upon confirmation. My pulse pounded in my ears. This ledger wasn't just financial, it was a weapon. One Elizabeth had clearly built with care and left intentionally for me. I didn't even realize Louise had stepped out until the door closed behind her. I was alone in that room, surrounded by iron, silence, and a truth so sharp it could cut flesh. I turned to the envelope marked "For Luna Only" and opened it slowly. Inside was a photo, a black and white image of my mother, Lorraine, holding a baby. But it wasn't me. On the back of the photo was a date: June 1989, 2 months before my supposed birthday. And one more line, scribbled hastily in ink: ask her who the child really is and why she made you forget. I sat in my car for over an hour, the envelope resting on the passenger seat like it might scream if I touched it again. The photo haunted me. My mother's face, young, glowing, maternal, was unmistakable. But the baby in her arms was not me. That child had a tuft of dark hair, chubby cheeks, and wore a hospital band dated June 3rd, 1989. I was born August 21st. Or was I? By the time I pulled into my mother's driveway that afternoon, my hands were still trembling. Her house hadn't changed since I left for college. White porch swing, wind chimes, roses by the window. It looked so ordinary, so incapable of harboring a lie this big. She opened the door before I knocked, as if she'd been waiting. "Luna?" Her voice was careful. "Is everything all right?" I stepped inside without answering. "We need to talk." She blinked at my tone, then shut the door behind me. "Of course. Do you want tea or—" "No." I held up the photo. "I want the truth." The color drained from her face. She didn't reach for the picture. Didn't even pretend not to know what it was. "I found it in Elizabeth's ledger box," I said, my voice low, "along with records that suggest Dad and Uncle Harrison stole from me. But this—" I held the photo higher. "This is something else. Who is this baby?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she moved to the sofa and sat down slowly, like the weight of everything she'd hidden had finally broken her spine. "I always knew this day would come," she whispered. I remained standing. She looked up at me. "That baby was your sister." My knees nearly gave out. "What?" "Her name was Grace," she continued, her voice quivering. "She was born premature, heart condition. We lost her after 6 weeks. Her eyes welled. She was my first." I couldn't process it. "But why hide her from me? Why act like I was your firstborn?" She wiped at a tear, then hesitated. "Because you weren't supposed to be mine." The world tilted. "What do you mean?" Lorraine looked away. "You were Elizabeth's idea. After Grace died, I spiraled. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Your father, Douglas," she shut down. "He blamed me, said my body failed him. It broke something between us." She looked back at me, the shame in her expression cutting deeper than any lie. "Elizabeth arranged everything, the donor, the procedure, all under the table. I was young, desperate. I didn't ask questions. I just agreed." The air left my lungs. "So I'm not even Douglas Garcia's biological daughter?" She hesitated. "No," she finally said. "You were born from a donor, anonymous, but raised as his. That was the deal." I staggered back a step. "And you never thought I deserved to know?" "You were mine, Luna," she said quickly. "That's all that mattered. I loved you. I still do." I sat down across from her, the photo in my lap, the past collapsing in on itself. "And Elizabeth?" I asked. "She knew?" She orchestrated it, Lorraine said, but later she changed. She started keeping records, asking questions. I think she always feared this truth would hurt you more than help you. I bit down hard on the inside of my cheek. And Harrison? He knew too? I don't know, she admitted. But he and Douglas became very protective of the family trust right after you turned 18. I think they feared what might happen if you ever learned the truth. I rose slowly. Well, now I have. Luna, wait! She reached for me. I stepped back. I came here for answers and I got them, but don't expect me to be grateful. You let me believe I was theirs while they stole from me while I stood in the shadows and begged for scraps. She opened her mouth to speak, but I was already at the door. As I stepped onto the porch, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number. Meet me. I know who your father is. R. The truth doesn't knock, it crashes. And the message I received last night shattered whatever illusion of control I had left. Meet me. I know who your father is. R. It had no signature, no follow-up, just the location. Waxley Park, 7 o'clock, a.m. place where I used to feed ducks as a child. Where my grandmother once told me, power isn't in titles, it's in leverage. I arrived early, hands cold despite the rising sun. The park was quiet, save for a few joggers and a maintenance cart humming in the distance. I sat on the bench near the pond, the message burned into my memory. At exactly 7, a figure approached. Gray coat, dark jeans, cap pulled low. He sat beside me like it was a coincidence. Raymond Garcia, he said without turning. Your mother's cousin. I turned sharply. You're supposed to be dead. He chuckled softly. Only to those who wanted me that way. His face had aged, but the sharpness in his gaze was unmistakable. I remembered him vaguely from a family wedding years ago. Then he vanished. Swept under the rug like all inconvenient Garcias. What do you want from me? I asked. I want you to win, he said, and I want to help. I stared at him. Help me what? Destroy the family? He looked at me then, eyes sharp as broken glass. No. Expose the truth. The rot runs deeper than you think, and you've only seen the surface. He handed me a slim USB drive. This contains internal memos, legal transfers, hidden holdings. Harrison's been siphoning money from the Garcia estate for over a decade, using shell corporations through offshore trusts. Your grandmother found out too late. She tried to reroute the inheritance. That's why she changed her will. I gripped the drive tightly. And Lorraine, Raymond sighed. She was complicit. Until she wasn't. She tried to back out after your 18th birthday. That's when Harrison cut her out, financially, emotionally. You were a liability, Luna, not a legacy. My throat tightened. So why now? Why tell me? He hesitated. Because you're the last one who still has a conscience. And because the Garcia name is worth saving if it's in the right hands. A beat passed between us. Then I asked the question that had sat like lead in my chest for days. Do you know who my biological father is? Raymond nodded slowly. I do. But it's not a fame you say lightly, and you'll need to be prepared. I swallowed hard. Prepared for what? He looked out toward the pond. For war. He rose without another word and walked away, leaving me with nothing but a plastic drive and a million questions. My heart thudded with adrenaline. Not fear, strategy. By noon, I had booked a private appointment at a law firm in downtown Charleston. Not the Garcia firm, not anyone connected to Harrison. I needed an estate lawyer. Independent, discreet. Her name was Danielle Harper. Sharp-eyed and surprisingly warm. I handed her the drive, my birth certificate, and the partial ledger from Elizabeth's lockbox. She scanned the documents in silence, then looked up. Do you know what this is, Luna? I shook my head. It's a pattern, a coordinated restructuring of Garcia wealth, shifting assets under new legal identities. It's not just theft, it's intentional displacement. They moved your stake out of reach. I leaned forward. Can it be reversed? She nodded once. With proof, yes, but you'll need standing, legal standing as an heir. I paused. Even if I'm not Douglas Garcia's biological daughter? Her expression didn't flinch. If you were raised under the presumption of paternity and included in previous legal documents, there's a case. especially if there's evidence that deception was used to block your access. I exhaled slowly. Then I need to find my biological father. Danielle tapped her pen thoughtfully. You find him, and you make him speak in court if needed. Because if he signs a statement of paternity, even retroactive, you gain more than a case. You gain control. Control. That word settled into me like a new spine. It was almost midnight when I sat alone in my apartment, the city of Charleston humming quietly outside the windows. The USB Raymond had given me now rested in the hands of Danielle Harper's team, being forensically analyzed and cataloged. But I couldn't sleep. Instead, I stared at the envelope I had retrieved from the safety deposit box earlier that day. Another artifact left by my grandmother, Elizabeth. A second will, signed, notarized, and sealed 6 months before her death. One line in particular had haunted me since I first read it. In the event of my passing, I named Luna Garcia, daughter of Lorraine Garcia, as primary beneficiary of the estate in entirety, superseding all prior documents. Superseding all prior documents, a phrase that sounded like thunder inside the walls of the Garcia estate. I had everything I needed, almost. But without knowing the identity of my biological father, Harrison would twist this into another illegitimate claim. And the others, they would parrot whatever narrative kept the power structure intact. But things were already unraveling. Earlier that morning, while sipping black coffee in a quiet corner booth at Middleton Cafe, I'd spotted Eleanor, Harrison's wife, nervously flipping through a file of property tax records. She didn't see me, or maybe she did but chose not to react. Either way, it was a sign. Someone else inside the Garcia walls was beginning to suspect. And if cracks had started forming from within, my job was simple. Wedge them open wide enough to let the truth flood through. 2 days later, I met Raymond again, this time in the back room of a small antique bookstore in Somerville. He looked sharper than before, calmer, like someone who'd watched a storm for years and finally saw lightning touch down. I ran the test, he said, not even bothering with pleasantries. We've confirmed it. I held my breath. Who? He handed me a sheet of paper, a DNA match form, simple, sterile, brutal in its clarity. Father, Reginald Thorne. Match. 99.97%. I didn't know whether to laugh or fall apart. Reginald Thorne, the man who had once served as CFO of Garcia Holdings, dismissed and disgraced 28 years ago under claims of embezzlement. The scandal had rocked Charleston's business circles, and he disappeared shortly after. I had been told he fled to avoid prison, but now I saw the truth. He didn't steal, I said quietly. He was framed, Raymond nodded, by Harrison. Elizabeth started suspecting it years later. She tried to find Reginald, failed, but before she died, she reached out to someone she trusted. You? Nah, someone higher. Someone still on the inside. I stiffened. Who? Raymond leaned forward. Eleanor. The name hit me like ice water. Harrison's wife? She wasn't always his. She worked with Reginald before marrying into the Garcia clan. She knew the books. She saw the numbers shift. She didn't speak out then, but she might now. I leaned back, pulse racing. So what's next? Raymond smiled grimly. We put her in a position where silence cost more than the truth. That evening, I returned to the Garcia estate for the first time since my mother's funeral, not as the girl who once hid behind her mother's coat, but as a woman with facts, leverage, and a plan. I walked through the grand foyer, past the paintings of ancestors who wouldn't have claimed me, and into the dining room where the rest of the family was already gathered. Harrison at the head, Vanessa and Douglas whispering, Aunt Sylvia on her third martini. All eyes shifted as I entered. I thought we agreed you wouldn't attend these dinners anymore, Harrison said, voice thick with authority. I smiled. I didn't come for dinner. I came to deliver something. From my bag, I placed a single folder on the table. Danielle's legal brief, a summary of the secondary will, a DNA test, and a letter of intent from the Harper Law Group to represent me in all matters of estate redistribution. No one moved, except Eleanor. Her eyes locked on the Garcia Holdings ledger tab peeking from the folder. Raymond's evidence, and I saw it. The flicker of recognition, of fear. She stood abruptly. Harrison, can I speak with you? Privately. Sit down, Eleanor, he snapped too quickly. But it was too late. The crack had widened. As I turned to leave, a text came through on my phone. From Danielle. They're panicking. Harrison's frozen one of the legacy accounts. But Eleanor just requested a private consultation. We may have our first defector. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in decades, a Garcia who mattered had chosen to break the silence. They didn't expect me to return to the mansion before the vote. And they definitely didn't expect me to walk in wearing grandmother Elizabeth's sapphire brooch, the one she wore to every board meeting at Garcia Holdings for nearly 20 years. But I wore it anyway, not for show, for war. The Garcia estate that morning buzzed with artificial politeness. Fresh-cut roses stood tall in vases that smelled too strong, the staff moved with robotic precision, and the breakfast table was set like a Southern magazine spread. Peach preserves, silverware lined, coffee piping hot. It felt like a stage, and I had no intention of playing the understudy. I walked past Douglas in the foyer without so much as a nod. He glanced at me, opened his mouth, then closed it again like a fish gasping for air. His confidence had shriveled ever since the Harper Law Group began contacting estate attorneys for file disclosures. No more smirks, no more Luna dear, just silence. I entered the drawing room where the vote would be held, an informal, family consultation organized under the guise of unity. In truth, it was a desperate attempt to contain the damage. Harrison sat at the head, flanked by Aunt Sylvia and Douglas. Vanessa leaned near the window, arms crossed like a teenager summoned to a church sermon. Eleanor notably was absent. I thought we'd wait until Eleanor joined us, Harrison said, barely masking his irritation as I sat across from him. She'll be here, I replied. And she would. She had agreed, after a tense 3-hour meeting with Danielle and Raymond, to speak, on the record, about Harrison's manipulation of the books in the final years of Garcia Holdings under Elizabeth's tenure. She wasn't doing it for me. She was doing it for herself. Self-preservation, as it turns out, is the Garcia family's native tongue. I hope this won't take long, Aunt Sylvia said, fidgeting with her pearl necklace. I have a luncheon. Of course she did. Harrison cleared his throat and tapped the gavel on the side table, a performative touch he'd started adding since assuming informal headship. This meeting is to discuss recent disruptions caused by outside parties, he began, casting a look at me that dripped with disdain. Luna has made certain claims. Before we escalate matters legally, I propose we settle it as a family. A vote. Douglas looked up. What are we voting on? Simple, Harrison said smoothly. Whether we recognize Luna's claim as valid or reject it and proceed to contest her suit in probate court. I raised an eyebrow. And who exactly gets a vote? Harrison smiled. All blood Garcias above age 21. Then I vote yes, I said calmly, to recognize the claim. Objection, Vanessa snapped. You're the claim. Still blood, I replied. Unless there's something you'd like to share with the room? Vanessa flushed, but said nothing. Sylvia glanced between us. Oh, this is ridiculous. Elizabeth left everything to Harrison. That was the will. No, I corrected. That was a will, not the last one. At that moment, the door opened. Eleanor stepped in, calm, composed, dressed in navy. She walked straight to the table and placed a manila envelope in front of Harrison. I'd like to submit this before the vote, she said, voice steady. What is this? He asked sharply. Evidence, she said, of financial irregularities during the last fiscal quarter under Reginald Thorne, irregularities you created. The room fell silent. Harrison's jaw clenched. You're out of your mind. I kept the records, she said simply, for years. I should have spoken sooner, but now I'm done staying quiet. She turned to me. Your father was a good man. He didn't deserve what happened. The words pierced something old and raw in me. I held her gaze and gave a slight nod. Not forgiveness, but recognition. And for the first time, I saw Harrison falter. Sylvia's fork clattered against her empty plate. Douglas blinked as if the room had suddenly tilted. Vanessa muttered, "What the hell is going on?" I leaned forward. The truth. Then Eleanor added, almost as an afterthought, "By the way, I vote yes. Silence gripped the room after Eleanor's declaration. Harrison didn't reach for the envelope. He simply stared at it as if doing so would make it vanish. His fingers twitched, almost imperceptibly, but I saw it. So did Douglas. So did everyone. The mask was slipping. Are we truly entertaining this circus? Aunt Sylvia hissed. She's senile, and Luna's clearly manipulating her. Eleanor didn't flinch. I may be a lot of things, Sylvia, but I know how to read a ledger, and I know what fraud looks like. Sylvia opened her mouth again, but Vanessa interjected, her tone unusually tight. Can we just get to the damn vote? There it was, panic masquerading as impatience. Harrison cleared his throat. A vote, then. He stood and walked slowly around the room like a judge preparing to pronounce sentence. Let's make it formal, he said, retrieving a sheet of paper and writing names across the top. Douglas was first. He looked up, hesitant. I vote no against Luna's claim. He didn't meet my eyes. Noted, Harrison said, jotting it down. Vanessa was next. No, she said quickly, arms still crossed. Sylvia followed. No, obviously. Harrison turned to Eleanor. I already voted, she said evenly. Yes. Harrison's jaw twitched. Duly noted. He looked at me. Yes, I said firmly. Then he turned to the last name on the list, Reginald Thorne. A beat passed. Everyone glanced around, confused. He's dead, Douglas said blankly. I said, pulling out my own folder. He isn't. They stared. I laid down the notarized document from a Nevada court. A legal name change order, dated 2002. Reginald Thorne, under witness protection for testifying in a major federal case, had legally changed his name before marrying my mother. He was never truly gone. He had simply been erased. By design. Harrison's face turned to stone. This is absurd, he snapped. You expect us to believe he's alive? I pulled out the second document, an affidavit from a hospice center in Idaho, signed by a physician and a witness. He passed 2 months ago, I said softly. But before he died, he left this. I placed a USB drive on the table, a recorded testimony confirming your role in manipulating Elizabeth Garcia's estate and pushing him out of the family company. It's been authenticated, and it names you, Harrison, as the orchestrator. The air felt like it had been punched out of the room. Sylvia looked like she might faint. Vanessa stumbled back a step. Wait, what are you saying? I'm saying the man you erased from the family narrative was my father, the real heir to the Garcia legacy, and I'm his daughter. A heavy pause. Then Harrison did something none of us expected. He laughed. Low, cold, measured. You think a video from a dying man and a bitter granddaughter will undo 3 decades of corporate control? This vote is ceremonial at best. You've made your splash, Luna. Now get ready for the backlash. He turned to Eleanor. You'll be discredited. Legally and socially, I'll make sure of it. Then he looked at me. And as for you, you have no idea who you're dealing with. I smiled. Small, razor thin. That's where you're wrong, Harrison. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. And I came prepared. At that moment, Danielle entered the room, flanked by 2 attorneys from the Harper Law Group. One carried a briefcase, the other held a court-ordered injunction. Sorry we're late, Danielle said smoothly, handing the papers to Harrison. But as of this morning, you're being served. The court has agreed to freeze all Garcia Holdings transactions pending full investigation. Sylvia gasped. Vanessa backed away. Douglas swore under his breath. Harrison stood motionless. This isn't over, he said, voice low and dangerous. I met his gaze head on. No, Harrison, I whispered. It's just beginning. Luna turns the ceremonial vote into a full-scale legal ambush, backed by court documents and her late father's testimony. Harrison is officially served. The Garcia empire begins to crumble, but his fury is only just awakening. They say legacies are built on names. I've learned they're built on choices. That morning, I stood alone at the edge of the Garcia estate's front lawn, the dew still clinging to the grass, the silence almost reverent. The same house where I once sat forgotten in corners and whispered my dreams into empty rooms now stood still. Wounded, perhaps, but not broken. The court order had frozen Garcia Holdings, yes, But what it couldn't freeze was the unraveling. The empire Harrison had suffocated into obedience was now cracking open at its seams. Lawyers were pouring through 30 years of falsified board minutes, unreported offshore accounts, and, most damningly, evidence of coercion tied to Elizabeth Garcia's amended will. But that wasn't why I was here today. I was here because of a different piece of paper. My grandmother's original deed. Eleanor had kept it, tucked away in a storage locker under the name Emma Caldwell, her college roommate, who'd passed away decades earlier. A decoy, a safeguard. The original document, untainted by Harrison's revisions, confirmed that the ancestral house, this house, had never truly been absorbed into Garcia Holdings. It remained a private family asset, passed directly from Elizabeth to Eleanor, and now to me. Eleanor emerged from the porch, a thermos of coffee in one hand, a quiet smile on her lips. "You sure you want this place?" she asked, holding out the cup. I took it. "It's not about the house." She nodded, as if that answer had been enough. Inside, the room still smelled like old oak and worn leather, but gone were the heavy portraits of men in suits, eyes filled with judgment. I'd had them all taken down. In their place, the walls now bore framed photographs, black and white snapshots of Elizabeth in her youth, handwritten recipes from her journals, even a faded candid of Reginald, my father, leaning against a cherry-red pickup truck in 1983. Each piece wasn't just decor, it was reclamation. Danielle met me in the drawing room with a stack of folders and a grin that was equal parts tired and triumphant. "We won the interim hearing," she said, dropping into the armchair. "Harrison tried to block the motion for forensic accounting, but the judge wasn't having it. And the board? They're hemorrhaging confidence. A few are already backing away from him. You've got leverage now. Real leverage," I exhaled. For the first time, the air didn't feel like it was strangling me. "Good," I said. "Then we're not done yet." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I handed her another file. This one, not from any lawyer, but from a local nonprofit. "It's called Garcia Roots," I explained. "It's a grant fund for women-led businesses in Georgia, minority entrepreneurs, single mothers, anyone who's been underestimated, pushed aside, or told they weren't enough." Danielle blinked, then smiled. "You're turning the family name into something real." "No," I said, "I'm turning it into something honest." Outside, the afternoon sun began to rise higher, throwing long shadows from the pillars of the estate. I walked to the back patio where renovations had begun, removing the surveillance cameras Harrison had installed, scrubbing out the mirror glass that once watched but never welcomed. There was a knock at the side gate. When I opened it, Douglas stood there. He looked different, not contrite exactly, but smaller somehow, less polished, more human. "I heard about the fund," he said quietly, "and the house. I figured you would." He nodded, then reached into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "It's from Mom," he said. "She's in a facility now, early stages of dementia. They said she started writing letters last week." I hesitated before taking it. Does she know what happened? Only pieces, but enough to regret some of it. I nodded, clutching the letter without opening it. Douglas turned to leave, but paused. "Luna, for what it's worth, I was wrong about a lot of things. You were. And with that, he left. I didn't cry, not then, but something unknotted inside me. As I stood there, a breeze lifted the edge of the letter, and for a moment, I felt the house breathe. Not the house Harrison had fortified with power and fear, but the one Elizabeth had once built with hope and my grandmother had protected with silence. It was standing again. And this time, it was mine. I sat in the sunroom as twilight approached, the envelope still unopened on my lap. Through the wide windows, I could see the workers beginning to string up warm cafe lights along the backyard fence, their laughter drifting faintly through the trees. The estate, no, my estate, was coming alive again. Not with power, but with people. My fingers trembled slightly as I tore open the flap. The paper inside was thick, her handwriting shaky but unmistakable. I could almost hear her voice, wavering between elegance and control, like she was always afraid too much honesty might shatter the room. "Luna, if you're reading this, then I've remembered enough to know I've failed. You, Not because I didn't love you, God help me, I did, but because I let someone else define what family meant. Harrison was the sun we orbited, and I let myself go blind to everything he eclipsed. I remember the day you asked me if the stories about Elizabeth Garcia were true. You were 12. I told you it didn't matter. They did. Elizabeth was your real grandmother, not just in blood, but in spirit. She questioned things. She broke rules that deserved to be broken. You inherited that from her, and I was too afraid to celebrate it. There is a safety deposit box in my name at Central Bank of Georgia. The key is taped to the back of this letter. Inside is my last will. Not Harrison's version, mine. I've asked that my share of the Garcia estate be transferred to you, along with all my personal holdings, the lake house, the trust, and most importantly, the original audio recordings Elizabeth made in the months before her death. She suspected Harrison. She feared what he was doing, but no one listened, not even me. I am listening now. Love, Elaine. I sat motionless for a long time, not out of shock, but from the quiet, devastating truth that she had waited too long. This wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. I placed the letter in the drawer beside me and picked up my phone. Danielle, I said when she answered, I need you to meet me at Central Bank tomorrow morning. She didn't ask why. I'll be there at 8. Before I could hang up, another call buzzed in. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A gravelly male voice came through. Ms. Garcia? Yes. This is Sheriff Caldwell of Monroe County. I'm calling about your brother, Douglas Garcia. There's been an incident. My chest tightened. What happened? There was a fire at the Garcia corporate townhouse in Atlanta. We believe it was arson. He's unharmed but shaken. He's requesting to speak with you. I looked out at the yard, the newly planted garden beds, the string lights beginning to glow. Of course. It wasn't over yet. Tell him. I'll come. After I hung up, I walked back into the hallway. The portraits I had removed were gone, but the echoes of power games and silence still clung to the plaster. I stood in front of the staircase for a long moment, staring at the top landing. That house had stood through storms, scandals, lawsuits, betrayals, but it was not the house that mattered anymore. It was the choice to stay, to reclaim, to reshape what it meant to belong. The Garcia name had once been a brand of fear. Now it was a chance for redemption. I picked up my coat, slid the key to the safety deposit box into my pocket, and stepped outside. The air was colder now. The stars were starting to pierce through the dusk. As I pulled the door shut behind me, I whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the house itself, I'm not running anymore. But just as I stepped off the porch, my phone buzzed again. One new email. Subject, inquiry, direct at Elizabeth Garcia's death from Georgia Bureau of Investigation. I stared at it, one sentence, previewed in the body. There are inconsistencies in the toxicology report. It's been 14 months since I walked out of the Garcia estate with that key in my coat pocket. The house is quieter now. No more boardroom whispers behind doors, no more footsteps echoing like verdicts down the marble halls. Instead, we host monthly gatherings for young entrepreneurs, mostly women, mostly first-generation business owners. The old study? It's a mentorship library now. Elizabeth's letters are framed on the wall. Danielle took the recordings to a podcast producer in Atlanta. The Elizabeth Garcia tapes went viral in 3 weeks. Not for scandal, but for the raw humanity in them. People heard a woman trying to warn the world and a granddaughter finally listening. Douglas? He took a plea deal. 3 years probation, mandatory therapy. We haven't spoken since, but last month he sent a check, no note, just a clean 6-figure donation to the women's shelter Elizabeth used to fund. That was his way of saying sorry. As for me, I didn't take the CEO seat. I appointed Camille Ruiz instead, a single mother of 2 with more grit and grace than any man in the Garcia legacy ever possessed. I joined the board, but mostly I spend my days writing, walking the gardens, or speaking at local schools about inheritance, not of money, but of value. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the sunroom with the windows open and a glass of iced tea in my hand, I think of Elaine. I think of what she gave me too late and how I turned it into something just in time. This isn't revenge, it's restoration. And for the first time, the Garcia name stands not because of what we built, but because of what we chose to rebuild. Thanks so much for watching Family and Heart Stories. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more heartfelt dramas every week.